All right, everyone, you may have noticed that the CPAC lineup contains very few actual old guard neocons, basically the kind of people that you would expect to be never Trumpers. Oh, maybe a John McCain, some former heavy hitter, former presidential candidate, longtime senator, really, really rich, able to, do all sorts of things for people, yet he's nowhere to be found. He's like, screw this stuff. You don't have maybe the Paul Ryans, the Mitch McConnells. You'll remember the last when Trump gave his State of the Union. Did Mitch McConnell smile or get up and clap with most of the other Republicans at times when everyone else was overjoyed? No, there was about a good 5 to 10% of the room that basically sat it out, just as there were a handful of Democrats that actually got up and clapped for Trump at various times, now which was kind of funny to see because a lot of times people assume that it boils down solely to the partisan. It does go a little bit beyond that at this point. I see that as a good thing. Other people, of course, if you're a lay Republican, you probably see maybe a Mitch McConnell as a traitor. If you're a lay Democrat, you probably see some, maybe even like a Kucinich who occasionally comes out and says, well, Trump's being ill-treated by the media. Probably see him as a traitor, too, because he's too far left, maybe, for the neoliberals. Now, instead, CPAC is focusing on people like Le Pen, Nigel Farage. You've got these individuals that the Republican Party is almost semi-globalizing itself in and of its message. It's just a different form of globalism. The neoliberal globalism that we've seen, it really leads to the rise of Trumpism here as well as Le Pen, Farage, and others abroad. That style of globalism is abusive, wants to dissolve all sovereignty. If you do that, you screw over the third world plus the West. A lot of people who are neoliberal, they don't focus on the other aspect of it. They just look at the West and they say, well, these poor people overseas should be able to come here. They don't even think about the ramifications for the donor nation, the brain drain, the loss of maybe more skilled individuals especially, as well as the movement of people who are extremely religiously zealous. But the neoliberals think that you're racist if you talk about that. That form of involuntary globalism is dying. What you see instead is the rise of a new order, I think, represented by the Le Pens, Farages, the Trumps of the world, as well as others. It's not just them. Duterte could be part of this, loosely speaking, because occasionally he insults even his friends. What you have is a new kind of global order, in which things are more voluntary and there is sovereignty, a slowing down of the movement of people that has been so helter-skelter for so long. It's causing problems all over the world. So you have a very cosmopolitan looking lineup at CPAC, actually, something that would have been cast as only white, older, male, Christian, zealous Americans maybe 10 years ago. Something that's not exactly the place you'd go to get a date, so to speak. It has become something different under Donald Trump. Now, right now, I'm pissed at Donald Trump on the gun issue, and that's a big strike, too, for me. Hopefully he tempers that, by the way. But he hasn't yet arrived at strike 3, and at least in the context of CPAC, he has improved the party, but then he began to improve it when he was accepting the nomination. For the first time, the room full of Republicans clapping for a gay person is a symbol that they're willing to at least somewhat move past some of the wedge issues they lost on for several election cycles. They've modernized the party. The Democrats, meanwhile, they're still living in 90s land. They still think that Kurt Cobain is the #1 hit on the radio, and they're having problems because that's the skateboarding tattoo kid is no longer the symbol of cool that they think it is. I just got a Game Boy, dude. I'm playing some Super Mario Brothers. Wow, it's so rad. It's so tubular. That's where the Democrats are stuck. Meanwhile, Trump, who's actually from that era, is like, we're leaving that behind. We're going to rebrand things a bit. CPAC has begun. You've got Sheriff Joe Clark, I believe, is going there, among others. It's not just Trump and Pence talking to a captive audience of a few fans. It's with Nigel and Le Pen aboard. It's definitely totally different style of CPAC than maybe what people are used to. And more people are interested in it, which is the other point. You've still got that Trump effect, where he knows how to line things up. He knows how to use his influence to make something more of a showstopper. He's also he invites people who are likely to say something that's, might unnerve people on the left. And he knows that the media then will breathe down their throats, but they'll at least be talking about it. So then you have the Democratic conference will be Nancy Pelosi whining for half an hour. Oh, Trump is a bigot and a racist. Schumer will come out and do the same. They'll be saying the same thing that they've been saying anyway, and it'll bore people. Because it's like, okay, well, you're preaching to the choir if it's a room full of Democrats, and you've already exhausted all the ammo you've got on these issues for anyone who's not a partisan Democrat, what do you expect actually at that point to accomplish? So CPAC has improved. That's a good thing. And remember, here's another thing a lot of people don't talk about. Trump's been at CPAC over and over again over the last, decade or so? And he's always been a fairly well-received individual there. He's the only person who managed to ream a room full of Republicans and not get booed off stage. He said, well, the Republican Party's got problems. It needs to change. And, you're going to have to look to new blood getting it within the party. You got a problem with the youth vote. You got a problem with minority voters. You got a problem with demographics, and you need to solve these things. The Republicans, while they weren't overly receptive to that message, you still got the Romneys and McCains of the party that would rather focus on so-called conservatism, which is 0.5% drop in your taxes. Ooh, goodness. Trump's actually a fiscal conservative on taxes. Doing a good job, by the way, by proxy on jobs and things related to that as a result. Certainly consumer confidence and business confidence is a lot higher than it was for the prior 8 years before Trump came to office. That's a great thing. Fiscal conservatism is actually a good selling point. The one thing, oddly enough, he's went in the other direction is really guns. On drugs, he's doing the tough on crime Reaganite thing. I don't think that's a good idea, but works with the lay Republican crowd, I guess, in most states. Alaska aside, I suppose. But he's shaking up the party message to a significant degree, and for a while it was a stagnant message. That's really what it boiled down to. There wasn't a big difference between any of the Republican platforms from Herbert Walker on through Mitt Romney. Through that entire period of time, very, very little change. 20 years. 20 years. Very little change, despite the fact that the Republicans in that period, look what they did. They have a one-term president. He's a failure. Clinton takes over 2 terms. By all accounts, does reasonably well. He's generally well received. His ranking falls now because of the Me Too stuff, but he's considered a good Democratic president. Bush comes along. At first, it looks like he's going to basically continue Clintonian policies plus give people a tax break. So people are like, oh, that's okay. He fucks the economy. He screws things up with FEMA, Iraq War, Afghanistan. The list goes on and on. Total failure. To the point where the Democrats get, to have the first black president who otherwise, because he had very little political experience, never would have been considered viable. McCain would have crushed him if it hadn't been for how bad W was. Obama looked palatable all of a sudden. The Democrats got a mandate, a carte blanche to take the country in a totally different and shitty direction. Then Obama, by all accounts, at least to partisan Democrats, does a good job. Everyone else might say, not so much. Partisan Democrats think he's one of the top 10 presidents of all time, which is wrong, and it's hilarious, but it's what he gets. But that's partially because the Republicans have been such idiots that they haven't been able to stop that sort of policy. Finally, we arrive at Trump. Different message. He's trying something new. CPAC looks totally different. The Republican Party's platform in the last election, I have every reason to believe in the midterms it'll be different. The one big thing that I have a problem with right now is the gun platform. I don't think the Republican Party needs to abandon rank and look like Democrat light on that issue. I think that would be a bad thing for certain competitive parts of the country. You need to, Virginia, certainly Florida, not going to make any allies there in areas that are competitive. You're preaching to the choir of the blue parts of those states that are on board with that, but they're going to be voting for the Democrats. They're not going to vote for the Republicans. At the very least, a very small number come over to you because of jobs. You're jettisoning potentially swing voters who are like, wow, I'm not going to give up my guns. No, I saw earlier I'm being liberal. They were like, if a kid hits another kid with a stick, what do? Give all the kids sticks? Give sticks to the adept kids, or take away the stick? And it's like you're actually saying what the far right says, which is, yeah, if a person is abusive with their firearm, go ahead and take their firearm. They're like a violent felon or something. But preemptively taking their stick because they're mildly depressed, or saying they can only have a stick of a certain length, that's just dumb. So actually, it's like that graphic that they've used on immigration, where the Native Americans are sitting there in the bushes watching the Spaniards approach, and they're like, oh, I think we should build a wall, or we shouldn't allow in migrants. And the other one's like, it's basically a statement in favor of nativism. They don't understand this, though. They think that it's just funny. Now, but what happened to the Native Americans, of course? The Democrats have chosen a number of losing issues. They're making almost the same mistake the Republicans made from the last paradigm, which means that as this paradigm dies, the Democrats, the onus is now on them to reform their views on immigration, their views on wedge issues like using race, especially directed towards the working and middle class whites of the country. They're going to have to change their issues. They're going to have to let those issues go and go to the right on them in order to survive, honestly, as a party.